Do you want to see my face?
Welcome to Storyflix. In this video, we will explain Haunt. This movie tells the story of a group of friends who discover a haunted house on Halloween and decide to explore it. However, things do not go as per plan as the night turns deadly. Will they survive the haunted house? Let's find out on Haunt. The movie starts on Halloween night. In the girls' dormitory down the street lived a woman named Bailey who lives with her friend, Harper. Harper looks sad because she just broke up with her boyfriend, Sam. Sam is an alcoholic who often hits her. Bailey comes to Harper's room to borrow her mother's ring. She needed the ring to complete her Halloween costume that night. That night, Angela and Mallory force Harper to come with them to celebrate Halloween night. At first, Harper refused, but she was forced and eventually went along. They had fun at a bar drinking beer mixed with soaked spiders. Mallory was very afraid of spiders. At the bar, there are two other men named Nathan and Evan. Finally, the six of them decided to continue the Halloween night by having fun in a haunted house. The car drove by Evan, then entered a deserted forest. Unexpectedly, a sign that reads "Haunted House" lights up. They found what they were looking for. To enter the haunted house, they had to go through a lonely and dark road. When they arrived, there were already several other visitors queuing up. In the haunted house, they were greeted by a clown who made no sound at all. Bailey was asked to come forward to play a simple trick. It turns out the clown gave her a key to a locker where they had to keep all their phones. Not only that, before entering the haunted house, they must read and agree to the agreement. All the rules amused Harper and her friends. The agreement states that if they are required to follow a predetermined path, not allowed to touch the ghosts inside, and they are not allowed to bring cell phones. Feeling this was just a joke, Harper and her friends started filling in their full names and addresses and signing the agreement. They did not expect the danger that was waiting behind the door. Finally, the entrance to the haunted house opened, and they entered. The place does look like a haunted house in general. Harper and her friends seemed to enjoy the surprises they encountered. After entering a room, they saw a witch. Seen if she will perform an attraction. Meanwhile, there was a thick glass wall separating them and the witch. The witch pulled out something that turned out to be a woman. The woman looks scared and asks for help. Evan was amazed by the woman's acting that looked convincing. The witch then took a hot iron rod and directly stabbed it in the woman's face. Her screams sounded terrible. After the show was over, a door opened and they continued on their way. Harper and her friends were then faced with two paths. There are two roads with a choice of safe and unsafe. So they decided to split into two groups. Evan, Harper, and Mallory choose to take the unsafe path, while Nathan, Bailey, and Angela take the safe path. And sure enough, on the unsafe path, Harper, Evan, and Mallory have to make their way through an alley full of cobwebs. Mallory, who has a fear of spiders, panics. It turned out that, even though there were many fake spiders, Harper could see if the haunted house manager also put a lot of real spiders. Meanwhile, on a safe path, Nathan, Angela, and Bailey only needed to pass through a passageway that was smeared with oil on every wall. Back to Harper, Evan, and Mallory. Now the three are faced with three coffins attached to the wall. When they opened it, they couldn't find anything inside until Harper realized a secret door on the far right coffin. To open the door, they had to go inside the coffin and close it. So Evan decided to go first. Sure enough, now Evan has arrived in another room behind the wall. Harper then followed, and Mallory came last. But Mallory is locked inside, and no door is open. Suddenly, a gap opened above, and dozens of spiders fell, making her hysterical in fright. Now that they had passed the coffin, they were faced with a very dark hole with no end in sight. Unlike them, Nathan, Angela, and Bailey enjoyed the safe path they chose. Now they are busy having fun with the illusion mirror. The scene moves to Harper's group. Now Evan started crawling into the hole, followed by Harper and Mallory. But the hole turned out to be a maze with branches. In the center of the hole, Harper could see a shadow, as if they weren't the only ones in the maze. But Harper continued her journey until she managed to get out of the maze. Surprisingly, Mallory didn't show up, as if she was lost in the maze. Unlike their group, Nathan's group was still having fun in another part of the haunted house. Now they are faced with a wall that has three holes. All they have to do is put their hands in it and feel the object behind it. Angela put her hand in, and she was so amused when she felt something disgusting in the hole. Unlike her, Nathan only found some grapes. It's Bailey's turn. Strangely, she couldn't feel any object behind the wall. Unfortunately, Harper's mother's ring that she borrowed fell off. So Bailey tried her best to find the ring until she screamed in pain. It turned out that her hand was now full of wounds, as if there were sharp objects in the hole. Meanwhile, Harper and Evan were still waiting for Mallory to emerge from the maze until suddenly, a man in a red hood and a devil mask appeared. He instructed them to continue on their way. Harper felt there was something strange about the haunted house. That's when she saw an emergency exit. But they were still forced to enter the next room. Now in front of them was another hole. Harper pointed herself to enter the hole first. It turns out the hole was just a slide that led her to a room decorated like a cemetery. She then faced a man with a terrible mask who carries a chainsaw. They were forced to continue their journey. After passing through a door, Harper and Evan finally met their other friends. But in this room, they saw the witch's show again. The terrible thing is, now the witch makes Mallory her ritual sacrifice. Mallory lay unconscious. They realized that this haunted house is not an ordinary haunted house. They tried hard to wake Mallory, but the witch ignored and stabbed an iron spear right in her head. They were hysterical but could not do anything to save Mallory. A door opens, and now they are forced to continue their journey in the haunted house. They knew they had to call the police, but they left their cell phones at the entrance. Obviously, they needed to get out of the haunted house as soon as possible. Harper then said that she saw an emergency exit in the previous room. So the only way to get to the emergency exit is through the door that Harper and Evan had passed. Evan then asked Angela's hair clips to open the door, but the door was designed so that it was impossible to open it without a key. Now, they have no other way to get out of the haunted house other than to continue their journey. Then Nathan volunteered to find out what was behind that door, while Harper and the rest waited to think of a way out. Nathan walked through the door holding the locker key as a weapon if needed. There are many statues covered with white cloth in front of him. Unfortunately, Nathan dropped the key. But what was horrifying was that the figure blocking him had suddenly disappeared. Full of fear, Nathan walked slowly past the statues until suddenly, one of the statues moved. It turned out to be the person behind the white cloth. The lights turned on. The man said that he would help Nathan. In the previous room, Evan noticed a crowbar in the next room. But his hands were too fat, so he couldn't reach it. So Angela decided to grab the crowbar, but suddenly someone stepped on her hand. Luckily Evan managed to grab the crowbar. Using the crowbar, Evan tried to open the door. That's when Nathan enters along with the man in the ghost mask. The man in the ghost mask then took out his keys and opened the red door. They immediately ran through the cemetery area as fast as possible and climbed the slide until they reached the emergency exit. Unfortunately, behind the door was a wall and not a way out. This made them angry, and they asked the man in the ghost mask to take them out as soon as possible. The man said that the only way was back towards the entrance. That meant they had to pass through the maze of branches where Mallory had disappeared. The man said that only one person could enter the maze so that the trap would not activate. Harper then asked for all the keys he had. Finally, Evan volunteered to be the first to pass through the maze. Amazingly, Evan easily found a way out. Now it's the turn of the man in the ghost mask to enter the maze. But he actually closed the exit door. Meanwhile, with his extraordinary memory, Evan managed to trace all the rooms they had passed. Back in the haunted house, now it's Nathan's turn to enter the maze. Nathan realized that the exit had been closed by the man in the ghost mask. On the other hand, Harper noticed that someone was trying to enter through the door behind them. Harper tried to hold the door and asked Angela and Bailey to enter the maze immediately. But Harper lost power. The door opened, and a man in a red hooded and devil mask entered with a fork in his hand. Without thinking, the man immediately walked towards Angela, who was trying to escape, and stabbed her in her face. Seeing this, the frightened Harper ran through the door behind her and continued her journey in the haunted house. Meanwhile, Bailey, who had entered the maze, apparently activated the secret door. Nathan fell into a different room. At the entrance, Evan finally made it out of the haunted house. But he couldn't find the locker. It turned out that their cell phones had been taken by the clown who greeted them. Now Evan is confronted by a man in a ghost mask who holds a hammer in his hand. The man then took off his mask, and to his horror, the skin on his face had been peeled off and pasted over with the skin of someone else's face. The man immediately swung his hammer and killed Evan instantly. And as he had experienced, the man also directly used his hammer to tear Evan's face. On the other hand, Harper, who tried to open the red door, actually broke the lock. Now the man in the red hood has arrived, and Harper is cornered. The man then took off his mask, and much to her surprise, the man had a terrible face with tattoos and horns on his face. Luckily, Nathan suddenly emerged from the next room and managed to save Harper. Harper managed to escape and ran until she entered a room with a bucket hanging. The bucket was full of animal organs. Harper put her hand in and tried to find something there. Luckily, she found a flashlight. And sure enough, the lights in the room suddenly went out, and now she was surrounded by darkness. Meanwhile, Nathan is on the other side of the haunted house. It turned out that behind the hole in the wall, there was a bowl of noodles, grapes, and razor blades. It was the razor that slashed Bailey's wrist. Nathan continued his journey until he entered a room. Inside the room, he managed to find all their cell phones that the clown stole. Suddenly someone approached, so he immediately hid. When he felt safe, he came out and was surprised to find a man in a ghost mask waiting for him. Luckily, Nathan retrieved Harper's cell phone and sent their location to Sam, Harper's boyfriend. The man in a ghost mask attacked Nathan. Luckily he fled. Miles outside the haunted house, Sam gets a message from Harper's cell phone. Now he knows Harper's location and decides to look for her. Nathan then found a ladder with a small door at the top. There, the only way out of the haunted house. On the other hand, Harper must pass through a very dark room with sharp object traps around her. It was clear that the room was made for its visitors to get hurt in the dark. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of her. A frightened Harper accidentally stepped on a bunch of spikes. She screamed in pain. In the midst of that darkness, Harper could see a rope moving. It turned out that the masked man was cutting the rope that would block access to exit from the darkroom. The frightened Harper ran, but she fell, and her hand was stuck with glue. To free herself, she had to pull her hand with all her might until the skin on her palm came off. Luckily she made it out of the darkroom just as the door closed. In the next room, she is faced with a door that says escape room. She entered the room. In a state of panic, she pushed a cupboard to close the door. It turns out that there is inverted writing behind the cupboard that asks her to find the key so she can get out of the haunted house. Harper began to open all the drawers in the room until she found a piece of paper with the same pattern as the walls around her. The clue led her to a wall with removable wallpaper. Behind it, there is a clue that says if dolls see all. Harper then checked all the dolls there. And from behind one of the dolls' faces, a paper says something is hiding under the bed. She knows that the next clue is under the bed. She crawled under the bed and managed to find a dollhouse. When she opened it, she found a key that looked like a knife. But the man in the red hood managed to get into the escape room. The frightened Harper couldn't do anything. But she was tired of always running away and decided to fight. So when the red-robed figure approached her, she quickly stabbed the key right in his eye. She immediately ran and tried to open the last door with the key in her hand. But the door exploded from the gunfire behind it. Harper is injured in the shoulder from the shot. It turns out this was a trap. In front of her was a rifle that was automatically set to fire. Harper tried to crawl. But behind her, the red-robed man was still chasing after her, even though his left eye was badly injured. Harper was strangled. And that's when Harper realized that she didn't want to give up. So she directly pressed a man's injured eye. The man screamed and got up, and that's when the rifle guessed and directly smashed his head. The light in the hallway was on, but Harper couldn't find the exit. It turns out that no one will be able to get out of the haunted house. On the other hand, the man in the clown mask had destroyed Evan's car so that no one could leave the place. Then we are shown with a black-robed figure walking towards Harper. Harper, who was hiding, finally managed to hit the black-robed figure and stabbed him to death. Unexpectedly, the figure behind it is Bailey, her best friend. Meanwhile, Sam, who followed the directions on his cell phone, arrived and met the clown. He stepped on a trap and a bolt shot through his neck. Sam then hit with an iron hammer. He died. Back to Harper. Fortunately, Nathan suddenly appeared from the wall behind her. But a man with a chainsaw appeared in the hall, ready to slash Harper's body. On the other hand, Nathan is attacked by a man in a ghost mask. The two had a fierce duel. With all her might, Harper managed to defeat him and save Nathan from the attack of the man in the ghost mask. Nathan then led Harper through the exit he had found. Harper managed to get out through the door, but the witch confronted her. Luckily, Nathan managed to open the door and pulled the wizard's leg until she fell. Harper quickly slammed the door into the wizard's face, killing her. Meanwhile, it turns out that the clown has indeed gone mad because now he is starting to burn the haunted house. Harper and Nathan realized that the car had been damaged, so the only way is to climb the guardrail. The haunted house began to burn, along with the clown in it. Luckily, they managed to find Sam's car. Now the two have managed to escape from the attacks of psychopaths in the haunted house. A few weeks later, a psychopath wearing a clown mask came to Harper's house to finish his unfinished business. It turned out that the form containing the addresses of the participants led the clown to Harper's house. But instead of successfully killing Harper, the clown actually fell into the trap that Harper had prepared. All traps are inspired by the haunted house. Then, without thinking, Harper came out with a shotgun and blew the clown's head off. This movie ends.